Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cosmere Casual, your casual reader's guide to Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. I'm your co-host and Sander fan, Nick Gorman.
And I'm AJ Gorman.
So this is not one of our normal episodes. It's actually our episode 0, or our introduction to us, right? And, what are we even going for with this podcast?
Because, there are a lot of Brandon Sanderson podcasts out there.
Yeah.
So what makes ours different from literally hundreds of other podcasts?
Right. So I guess, maybe he's taking a step back. The Cosmere is a big series of interconnected books. I hear, the common analogy is that it's the MCU of sci-fi fantasy, except like where a movie is maybe 2 hours long, Cosmere books range from like 100 pages to over 1,000 pages. So it takes a little bit more investment to get into them, right? And
it takes, yeah. And even if you are into them, or even if you are invested into them, I, for one, find it very difficult to keep everything straight in my mind. So a majority of the reason why we're doing this podcast is so that I can try to fit all of the necessary information into my brain more or less at the same time.
Well, and it's not like it's, all necessary information, right? So like in our experience, recognizing these connections like really heightens the experience of reading the book, like, more than a normal Easter egg would. So, it comes up around like the magic systems between the different series, together, because even though they're all different, they have a similar ground rule, similar principles that cover all of them. So like once you start to wrap your head around these things, the magic systems start to feel more intuitive, more familiar. Like they're still magical, it's just different kind of magic, in my opinion.
But then there's the part of it where you and I will be talking about the books and I'll just do like a head whip and be like,
wait,
what?
Yeah.
Because either I've forgotten something or you've seen on Reddit something that, a word of Brandon that I hadn't gotten to, or, I just hadn't put the puzzle pieces together.
Quick note, Brandon Sanderson's the author of the series, and he's also very engaged with his fans. So, frequently he's doing interviews or hosting podcasts or doing, signings, things like that. And he talks about the books and he responds to reader questions. And so a word of Brandon is like pseudo-canonical, but like not in the text. So it's, information about the universe.
Which, another side note, on top of a side note, he really needs to stop doing those.
Well, but at the same time, like it's nice to have different pieces to put together sometimes. Like, I don't know. Like
if meeting with fans and doing all these events is keeping him from writing another 4 books a year.
All right. Okay.
The year of Sanderson just ended.
Yeah. So there was a big Kickstarter campaign. Anyway, Google year of Sanderson, you'll get it.
But yeah, if taking time out of writing is what's keeping him from publishing more books, then I think he should stop meeting with people. But that's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
But I also don't fangirl too much. But I think other people enjoy that kind of thing.
So, I guess, going back to like what the purpose of this is, generally Brando Sando is pretty upfront about how, each series can be read independently of the others. But at the same time, there are connections between the different series. Like, you'll have cameos from people in Mistborn showing up in Stormlight Archive or other things. But as the series each go on and get longer, sometimes, whole characters or entire scenes, they start to feel out of place if you haven't read where they were originally from. And I know, some of my friends that actually, because they didn't, they haven't read all of them. It's like, well, sometimes it bothers them. They feel like they're missing something.
Yeah, and I think that's just going to get even worse as time goes on because Brandon, has the next 30 years planned out for publishing books and writing books. So I think it's just going to get more interconnected, and I don't think he'll be able to tout that as much in future years.
Yeah. But I mean, at the same time, it's also interesting because, in World, the main characters of each series don't really know anything extra about world hoppers or other magic systems, right? So if you're reading the Mistborn series, none of your point of view characters really know anything about the magic from, like, the Emperor's Soul or Stormlight Archive, unless it's explained to them on screen. right?
Right.
So it's not like you've got, you know, Iron Man having major development in a Captain America movie. Oh, wait a minute, that happened.
Sure.
Yeah, never mind. You know, there are crossovers, but it's usually not you know, up to where we are now, it's usually not the point of the book. That's all I'm trying to say. The other thing, you know, I wanted to mention is that there's a ton of, you know, other podcasts like the Shardcast, and there's, you know, YouTube stuff, and there's, you know, Coppermind for people who are like really hardcore fans and have already read everything and don't need to worry about spoilers. And there's, you know, and on the other end of the spectrum, there's like 1,000 articles and stuff about reading order, but there's not really anything for people who are casual readers who maybe want to know, you know, what to catch up on before reading the next Cosmere book without, you know, rereading a dozen books.
Or if you're about to reread a book.
Yeah.
Hey, here's some tips of, you know, things to look out for. Like, hey, remember to look out for Kremlings and Stormlight. So we're going to have kind of 3 different episode archetypes for our podcast. So we're going to have a pre-read episode.
Yep.
Where there will be no spoilers. We'll kind of talk about this. There will be no spoilers.
Well, like, you can't really talk about what to know going into the second book in a series without talking about where things left off at the end of the first book of the series.
Okay,
right?
all right. For sequels and stuff. But for a first book in a series, there's no spoilers.
Yeah.
We'll just be talking about settings and, you know, why this might be a good place to start. Or why not, or things like that. Our second episode type will be a post-read, where we're really just going to look at the book in and of itself. We're really not going to talk about the larger Cosmere. We're just going to appreciate the book for what it is.
Well, and we'll have, you know, I think the difference between like our post-read, you know, episodes and like our Cosmere Connections type of episode,
which will be the third type.
Yeah. So those post-read episodes, those are really just going to have spoilers for that book that we just finished reading, whereas the Cosmere Connections type episodes are going to have spoilers for the entire published Cosmere.
Plus Words of Brandon. Yep.
Plus Words of Brandon. So, yeah, and also, you know, pseudo-canonical and speculative type stuff.
Yeah, so if you like reading Brandon Sanderson, but you don't really necessarily want to be invested in the greater Cosmere, you can read the pre-read and the post-read and be just fine.
Yeah.
But if you do want to learn a little bit more, recap kind of how the book fits into the greater Cosmere, you can read that or listen to that third episode type too.
And, you know, every now and again, we'll, especially if we need, like, you know, maybe more time to read a 1,000-page Stormlight Archive book.
Or digest all of those thousands of pages.
We'll have, you know, one-off type of episodes to dive into a topic that, you know, spans, that doesn't really live in one series or another, like who's this Hoyd guy who shows up in almost literally every Cosmere book,
or do like a deep dive into the interludes for Stormlight. I'm really excited to do that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think it's going to be a while, but it should be good.
Yeah. So, who's this podcast for? We're aiming for casual readers, someone who's like just getting into the Cosmere. Or maybe someone who's aware that there is a Cosmere, but like doesn't want to have open books from multiple series cross-referencing as they read, or go spelunking through spoiler-filled wikis and Reddit posts to figure out, this seems familiar. We want to just, you know, help facilitate those connections.
Yeah, every time I go into Coppermind, it's like, oh, I'll just look up this one quick thing, and then, you know, 5 links later, it's like, where did I start this search again?
Wikis. We're hoping that we're accessible enough for folks who are new to the Cosmere and, you know, Brandon Sanderson's works, but also like interesting enough for someone who's read and reread and people I already talk about it with at work, things like that.
Yeah, like I said, like I've reread all of the published books multiple times, and I'm still got to treat this as like research books and try to take notes and try to make the connections, because it's very difficult to keep all this information in your head at once.
Right. But it's also like, I mean, even without treating it like a research project, you know, they're still good books. They're still enjoyable. It's just
very much so.
But who we're not really targeting with this is, you know, folks who are already Uber fans or making memes on Creme posting about things like Cheese Plate, it's not,
What?
there's, all right. We'll get there when we get there. It's
cheese plate?
it.
Okay.
We're gonna have an aside. It's gonna get cut out from the episode, and then we'll get back. So, there is somebody asked in a signing thing, Brandon Sanderson, about whether a shard blade could cut through cheese, because.
Oh, I remember you talking about this. Okay.
So because they can cut through anything, but they leave really thin, they're very thin. The cheese is flexible enough that it caves back in, and that's why cheese knives always have holes in them. But shard blades don't have holes in them.
So Brandon first answered that, like, yes, of course the shard blade can cut through cheese.
But then he realized that was contradicted by the fact that the last
physics.
clap is used, and so clearly there's friction affects shard blades. Then he had to, revert the word of Brandon. We might leave this in.
Okay.
Yeah, because shard, like that's the mechanics of them isn't really a spoiler.
When you said cheese plate, I was like, well, a variety of cheeses on a plate.
No,
but you're combining cheese with
cheese.
Shard plate.
Yes.
Cheese plate.
Yes.
Okay.
If you can't afford shard plate, which is the normal protection from shard blades,
wear a suit of cheese.
Make a suit of armor out of cheese.
Yeah, that's practical.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay. Getting back to it.
So
maybe this will be a podcast explaining all of the Stormlight me.
Certainly, as we get there, I think we want to cover a little bit of ground first. But yeah, so this podcast might not be right for everybody, but we want to make it anyway.
We do.
So, the other thing we should probably talk about is like who we are as people, maybe.
Well, I was just about to say that, doing this podcast gives us something to talk about other than our children and our jobs. So we have increased our topics of conversation by 50% by doing this podcast. So yay!
Yay! So who I am, I guess, as a reader, or like, who I am as a reader. I read a lot of Brandon Sanderson. Obviously, I'm making a podcast about it, right? But my favorite works, I think my favorite book is probably The Raven Tower by Anne Leckie, right? And it's not the same as a Cosmere book, right? Where your Cosmere tends to be, well plotted. There's a lot of thorough world building. The characters all have great arcs, and then the plot is there's an initial hook, then there's a lot of threads, and they all come together in a big Sanderlanche at the end. The Raven Tower is comparable in the world building. It is less accessible to read because it's told in a very unique way. And I think it's a really beautiful book, and I love. But what it has in common for folks who like the Cosmere would be the wonderful world building aspect.
One of these days, I'm really going to have to read that book so we can actually talk about it.
I've only read it like 7 times since it came out in 2019. It's really good.
Well, you have a greater breadth of authors that you read from these days, whereas I'm reading Brandon Sanderson, Sarah J. Maas, and Rick Riordan. And between those 3 authors, I find it really difficult to add anything else in because I'm always rereading Brandon Sanderson, or there's a new book from him, or there's a new book from Sarah J. Maas, or I just want to on vacation and I just want something easy that I don't have to think about. So that's Sarah J. Maas again. And then Rick Riordan, I love it. I don't care that it's young adult. I am pleased as punch to reread that every day of the week.
Well, and that's one of the fun things about, Brando Sando is, his books are pretty easy to read, but there's also, if you want more out of it, then you can always just get more out of it in terms of making these connections between other books, trying to figure out what's coming next. Like, he's very good at foreshadowing and
he's very good. He's very plot heavy, so there's not a whole lot of flowery language or something, for reasons why I hated, Tolkien, or it's just like, okay, how long are we going to be talking about the woods? So yeah, that's some of the reasons why I like Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, the other thing that's non-Brando Sando that I read a lot is anytime there's a new Murderbot Diaries book out, I've got to read it, and it's very the name of the series is the Murderbot Diaries. It's tongue-in-cheek, it's sarcastic, it's funny. So similar to Brando Sando, it's pretty easy to read. The language is a little bit harsher. Sanderson doesn't feature much swearing, if any, in his books, but it's more exciting. The plot moves, but it also has hidden depths to it, where it's got, it's on the one hand it's a funny story with explosions, but the main, it's a character driven thing, where Murderbot is a very complex character with real depth and constantly exploring its traumas and anxieties. And it's a really good series. Highly recommend that one as well if you're into characters who are working through their flaws, but maybe not so much if you're really into the world building, because Murderbot definitely does not have the same depth on that front.
Well, and you're really big into philosophy, and like Murderbot is super heavy on that. But Brandon, has philosophy scattered throughout all his books as well.
Yeah.
They're not the huge themes, on most of most of his novels, but there's definitely things to ponder.
He's got stuff
in all
to
of his
say.
books.
Yeah. And, you maybe have to look for it. Maybe you don't have to look very hard. But yeah. So I know I said up front that there's like a million articles about reading order, and nobody probably needs our opinion. Do we want to talk about it a little bit?
I just want to say, start where you want.
It doesn't.
There is no, like, there are some authors out there with a collection of books where it does matter where you start. This, to me, with everything that's published so far, I honestly do not think there's a very strong reasoning for where to start anywhere. So start where you want.
There's like 7 really good starting. Like, it started at the beginning of a series. That's the only thing.
Who on earth would recommend someone start in the middle of a series?
Star Wars.
Oh, God. Fair enough.
So, yeah. It doesn't, that's the only thing. Start in the middle of a series. Or don't start in the middle of a series. No, don't do that. Don't start in the middle.
Okay. Need some coffee over there?
Yeah.
You can read the physical book, you can read an ebook, you can read an audiobook.
I hear really great things about the graphic audio if you're rich. They're very expensive.
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
There's graphic audio adaptations
what
where
the hell is that?
It's an adaptation. It's like an audiobook, is the best I understand. I don't know. When I win the lottery, I'll show it to you.
Okay. Huh. I didn't know about that. Well, anyways, audiobook is great. I love listening to the audiobook versions and doing chores and stuff.
Our perennial complaints about the audiobooks is character name pronunciations
are not consistent.
They're not consistent between authors, and between narrators.
Which freaking blows my mind, because like Kate Redding and Michael Kramer do most of the stuff, and it blew my mind when you told me, oh, they're married. They're fucking married and they can't get their pronunciation straight? What?
All right.
They get it straightened out, but the first recording for Stormlight is not consistent. But after that, they do consolidate.
I still don't know whether the word is pronounced palanquin or palanquin.
Well, according to Brandon, you pronounce names and words however you want.
Well, but that's like an actual... Anyway, I'll look it up. I'll look it up later.
But why should that be any different? A rose by any other name.
A rosé.
Just as sweet.
A Rozzy?
Well, I think... Is that how they got Rosalind?
I don't know. Is there anything else we want to talk about with this one? Are we good?
I do want to note that Brandon does play around a little bit with capitalization, so there is maybe a little bit lost doing an audiobook versus either an ebook or a physical book, but Honestly, if you're, I mean, if we notice that, because at this point we have all of the versions except for the graphic audio, which whatever, we have all of the versions. So when we notice capitalization like that, we're going to mention it in the show.
So capital B breath, capital C connection, capital I investiture.
No, I forget what novel it is, but there's something where there's a letter written and there's like weird capitalization happening in the letter, and that was on purpose. We never noticed because most of the time we're doing audiobooks.
Yeah, because it really is convenient for the chores.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you want to talk about podcast release schedule?
So we've
uploaded a few episodes already. Very exciting. I'm excited. I hope you can tell. But we're gonna switch to a once every 2 week schedule for a little bit.
Bi-weekly.
Bi-weekly can mean twice a week.
I know. That's why I said the word, because I knew it would throw you off a cliff.
Once a fortnight. But nobody uses Fortnite except it's a video game. So, once a fortnight, or maybe once every 2 weeks, or maybe bi-weekly, or maybe those all mean the same thing. Until we've got a little bit more of a release schedule down, and if you start seeing episodes come out every week, maybe we're down every week. But I think that's all I got.
Yeah, we hope you enjoy our podcast.
Yeah, the intro and outro music is licensed from Tribe of Noise. Check that out for any music you need to license. The artist is Ketsa, and the song is called Odyssey. Feel free to email us at cosmerecasual@gmail.com with questions about the Cosmere you want answered, or just to let us know that someone out there is listening to us.
And until next time, keep your wits about you.